first part of the report.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the second of the quality account reports for your consideration this evening. As has previously been indicated, the intention is that you receive your presentation here tonight, express any views and comments, and that they will be incorporated into a declaration, a third-party declaration that will be forwarded on to the Tees Valley Joint Health Scrutiny Committee to form a combined declaration that will be submitted to the Trust in terms of a comment to their quality accounts. So, Chair, at that point, I'm going to hand over to the Trust.
Thank you.
Let's change my name so you can see who I am. Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm Sharon Pickering, I'm Director of Planning and Performance in the Trust, and I have responsibility, along with my colleague, the Director of Nursing, for producing our quality account / quality report. Just in terms of some introductions, I've brought with me today Dr. Chris Lanigan, who works in my department and actually physically produces the report. And clearly, by him being here, if there are any specific issues that you raise that we feel we can incorporate in the report, because it's not written yet, we can take that away and Chris can make sure that we pick those issues up. And I've also got Christine McCann, who is from our Nursing and Governance Directorate, representing the Director of Nursing, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. I'm not going to dwell on this slide because really it's exactly the same as Nicola said. So what I'm here to do is give you an overview of where we are against this year's priorities, talk a bit about next year's priorities, and really is to give you the opportunity to ask questions to help formulate your response to us when we formally send out a quality account for your comment. This has already been covered by Nicola in terms of why we have a quality account, so I'm not going to repeat that because it's exactly the same for Tees Esmond Weir Valleys as it is for the ambulance. Excuse me. We do our quality account slightly differently to NIAS in terms of how we engage our stakeholders. Each organisation does this differently. What we do is we have two specific events during the year. So we have one in July, where we invite a range of stakeholders, including all the other review and scrutiny committees that cover the areas we serve, our commissioners, Health Watch, and we invite them and ask them to tell us what they think is important in terms of improving quality in our services. And we take their views back to our board, and we say to our board, this is what our stakeholders said was important. Does the board support that? And then, assuming the board does support it, and in all the time that we've been doing the quality accounts they have, we then develop plans on how we're going to respond to those priorities, which we then share again with those stakeholders in February. So I always describe the July session as being the what are we going to do, and the February session as being how are we going to do it. And that gives stakeholders the opportunity to say, oh yeah, okay, you've told us how you're going to do that, but you've forgotten this, or we think you should do this as well, or why are you doing that? That's not really important. So that's how we engage our stakeholders, as well as the formal opportunity to comment on the quality account that the council has. So just moving on then to our progress against our current priorities. So these are the priorities for 14-15. I have to emphasise that the 4 priorities I'm going to talk to you about are the 4 things we're doing on quality that we chose to put in our quality account. They are not all that the organisation is doing on improving quality. To get those things, you would need to look in our business plan that includes quite a lot more things that we're doing. But these are the 4 things that we've agreed with our stakeholders will be included in our quality account. And for the current year, there were 4 of those. One was about managing pressures on inpatient beds. One was about suicide prevention. One was about implementing the care programme approach, which is the approach that we use across mental health services to make sure that we are planning and delivering the care that people need to meet their needs. And the other was about embedding the recovery approach, and I'll touch on that a bit more when we get to that slide. So this is the position as where we were at the end of Q3. So what we said this time last year we were going to do are the things that are highlighted there under the action. So you can see there are 7 actions that we were going to try and take to make sure that we managed our inpatient services appropriately and people could get access to beds when they needed it. Some of you may have seen in the national press over recent months, the last 6 months or so, there's been a lot of press interest on what are called out-of-area admissions. And what that basically means is that because of pressures on beds, people cannot be admitted to the hospital that they would be expected to be admitted to, and may have to travel quite a long distance away from their home area to get admissions into their, what is called, the beds that they would be expected to be admitted to. I'm pleased to say that in the time that the FT has been in existence, we've only had 1 case in, since 2006, where 1 patient had to go into a bed in Newcastle rather than a bed locally, and that is, I mean, clearly 1 patient is too many, but compared to some areas, that is really, really positive performance. But actually what we want to do is more than that. We don't want to just look at where we're sort of taking people outside of the tube patch. What we want to try and do is make sure that people can access their local beds. So if you're a resident in Hartlepool, can you get into the local beds for Hartlepool? Or is it that you have to go to Durham because the pressure is too great on the beds in Hartlepool? So we monitor that quite carefully, and we set about these actions to try and improve that position. And you can see that half of the actions are on track and slightly behind track. And part of the reason why they're behind is that one of the things we wanted to do was to appoint an expert practitioner who could give advice to our crisis teams on helping maintain people in the community. And that post we went out to recruit, and we couldn't recruit the first time round, and we've actually now got someone on secondment into that post. So we are expecting that by the end of Q4, these actions will have caught up, and we will have fully delivered all of them by the end of March. In terms of suicide prevention, again, this was one priority we agreed with our stakeholders, to try and make sure that wherever possible, we did everything we can to help prevent people taking their own lives through suicide. It's fair to say, and it is accurate to say, that not everybody who commits suicide is known to us as an organisation. Some people commit suicide who are not known to mental health services at all, they've never been referred to us, but nevertheless, there are some people who commit suicide who are under our care at a point in time. And what we wanted to make sure is that our staff felt confident and competent in doing the best risk assessment that we can do to make sure that the plans we put in place to help those individuals deal with their mental illness are as effective as they can be, and thereby hopefully preventing them attempting to take their own lives. So again, as at the end of January, we've made good progress on this priority. As you can see there, there is just one action that is red, and probably still will be red, to be honest, by the end of the year. And again, this priority was delayed because the member of staff that was leading this left the trust, and we had a significant problem replacing replacing her, it's fair to say, finding someone with the necessary skills to help us take this piece of work forward. So we have managed to still do some of the actions, as you can see, but that has made us delayed in terms of completing the training. But the board have recognised this and recognised the importance of it, and have actually allocated some specific time at their April. Every month we have what's called a board seminar, which is a sort of development session for the board, and they have allocated some time at that session in April to talk about this in more detail and to identify the best way forward to achieve what we're trying to achieve in terms of making sure our staff do get the relevant training. Our third priority was about our care programme approach, and as I said before, this is the sort of model that we use in mental health services to make sure that working with the service user, we develop plans and put those plans into place that helps the person reach a point where they can function as and live their lives in the way that they wish to live their lives. And again, you will see here that 2 of the 3 actions are on track, with one action being slightly at risk, but not significantly. And I do expect, again, that by the end of March, that the amber green there will convert to green. So we are on track to redesigning our CPA processes. As a trust, I think we work with 7 local authorities, and in the past we've had a single CPA policy that has been applicable to all of those 7 local authorities. Actually, we're going for a slightly different model now, so we're going to have a single front end of the policy that talks about principles and why CPA is important, but we're actually going to have an individual attachment for each local authority that will describe how that will be done working with that individual local authority. And that just reflects that different local authorities are at different places in terms of their development of CPA. So rather than trying to do one system meets everybody, we're trying to make it more localised to individual local authorities and social services departments who we work very closely with in terms of delivering services. And our last priority for 14-15 is called embedding the recovery approach. And what recovery means in this sense isn't what people might think recovery means when you're talking about a physical health problem. What this means is that we help people identify their own goals, what it is that they want in their lives, and then we work with them to find ways to deliver that and for them to achieve those goals. So that might not be that, they stop having mental health problems. They may continue to have problems, but we find ways of working with them so that they can continue to live their lives as they want to live them. So our chief executive tells this story. He was on a train once talking to a colleague whose son has mental health problems, and he was talking about recovery to him. He said, well, he said, what my son doesn't want, he said he doesn't actually want to get rid of the voices in his head. He doesn't want them to go away. But what he wants to be able to do is go down the pub on a Friday night and have some friends that he can have a pint with, or he wants to be able to get a job. So what that's about is, what does that individual want? And does that individual feel that his mental health problems are holding him back from doing the things that he wants to do? And how can we support him to be able to go down the pub on a Friday night and have a drink with his mates, like many of us in the room probably do on a Friday night? So that's what recovery means in terms of mental health. And it is something that the organisation has been fully committed to and is one of the top priorities in the organisation. And as you can see there, we were on track on Q3, and we are on track to deliver that priority in full by the end of the year. So they're the priorities for the current year. In terms of our performance metrics, and I will apologise apologise in advance because there are percentages on this presentation. And it is also quite small. But what I will pick out is the ones that are red. So within our organisation, when we talk about numerical metrics, if we are achieving the metric, it is green. If we're not achieving it, it's red. We don't tend to have answers for nearly achieving. It's either achieved or it isn't achieved. So the ones on this slide that you probably can't see in DL, but I'll outline them to you, are the number of patient falls per 1,000 admissions. So for every 1,000 people that get admitted, how many falls do we record that have happened in the period in question? And what these numbers demonstrate, although you can't see them probably, is that for the year to date, we are not achieving what we set out. We wanted to have a rate of just over 28 per 1,000 admissions, and actually it's almost double that for the year to date. However, what we can see is that the number at each quarter is reducing. So there was 52 in quarter one, and that reduced to 39 by quarter three. And that's part of due to some of the work we've instigated as a result of quarter one's figures being higher than we anticipated or wanted them to be. So we have established a trust-wide falls group to see if there is anything we can learn from services across the trust in terms of how they are preventing falls. And what I can tell you is that we actually monitor the severity of harm that people suffer if they fall. So, and that is reducing. So we are having less and less severe harm compared to low harm falls. So clearly we would like to reduce falls altogether, but given that we have a number of population groups, older people and people with learning disabilities, that may not always be possible. So what we are trying to do at the same time is reduce the amount of harm that people may suffer by making sure they have hip protections or things like that, so that if they do fall, they hopefully won't hurt themselves. The other one that is red in quarter three, although it was green in quarters 1 and 2, is linked to undertaking audits of NICE guidelines. And we set ourselves a target of 100%, and in quarter three we only achieved 75%. Again, that is a process indicator, and I am expecting that by the end of quarter 4, all those audits will be completed as planned. And the final one on that sheet is linked to the length of stay, the average length of stay for older people, which is red and has been red for the 3 quarters to date. This is the average. When you look at the median length of stay, which is if you take every length of stay that somebody's had and you take the absolute middle point, the median is actually below our target. And what that means is that we've had 1 or 2, well actually it's 6, older people who have been discharged but have been with us for a very long time. So in quarter 3, for example, we had one patient that had been with us over 2 years in our inpatient facilities, and we look into each one of those and understand why they have such a long length of stay. And in this particular case, the individual had very complex needs, had very complex physical needs, in addition to their mental health problems, and trying to get the medication correct in line with their physical health needs, because sometimes the medication we use has an impact on people's physical health as well. It was quite a complex case. So obviously we don't want to discharge people until we feel that they are in a stable position, and that in some instances takes longer depending on the complexity of people's needs at the time. And the final one there is percentage of complaints satisfactory resolved. So we try to make sure when people complain and we investigate their complaint and we respond to them, that actually they are satisfied with the response that they've got. And unfortunately, we have had a number of instances where the individuals have come back and said that they haven't been satisfied, that they want us to do some further investigation or to explain something in more detail, etc. So, of course, we do respond to those people when they contact us. We have recently, Christy might have a bit more detail on this, because it is within the Nursing and Governance Directorate the complaint sits. We have just undertaken a review of our complaints processes, and we're introducing new processes which we hope will improve our investigations when we receive a complaint. So hopefully the standard of our responses will improve in order to, and people will feel more confident in the response that they receive. And then these are our national targets that we need to report on. The first red there is the number of occupied bed days of under 18s admitted, under 18-year-olds admitted to an adult ward. We are, first of all, I should say that we have no instances of under 16s being admitted to an adult ward. So these individuals will be 16, 17 or 18, well not 18 obviously, 16 or 17. And you will see that in quarter 3 we didn't have any bed days occupied by anyone on an adult ward who was under the age of 18, but we did in earlier quarters. When we have that happening, each one of those is investigated to make sure that it is clinically appropriate for that to happen, because sometimes it is appropriate for an under 18 to be admitted to an adult ward. So if I was, say, 17 years and 320 days old, and it was expected that my inpatient stay was going to be several months, it may be more appropriate for me to be admitted to an adult ward so that I don't have to change at my 18th birthday. Also, we know that some individuals who are 17 are quite mature 17-year-olds, and actually being on an adolescent ward would not be best for their needs. Sometimes parents ask if their children can go to an adult ward because they feel that that's more appropriate for their child. And sometimes it might be individual circumstances around an individual that means that we wouldn't want to put them on a children's ward. So we do investigate them all, and I have the audit trail that shows all of those were deemed as clinically appropriate by the relevant medical staff. In terms of the retention rate, that's a target. This is to do with substance misuse. We only provide substance misuse services in the Durham locality. We don't provide that in Hartlepool, but nevertheless we do report it in our quality account, and that data for quarter 3 isn't yet available, so we can't report that at quarter 3, but at the year to date we are slightly under the target by about 1%. And our number of crisis resolution home treatment episodes, we are under for quarter 3, although have been over for the previous 2 quarters. So we will see what the position is at the end of quarter 4. And then this is interesting because you probably can't remember now, but on Nicola's presentation, she also had the number of incidents that were reported. And she reported her performance as being red because she had more patient safety incidents than they expected. We actually had less patient safety incidents than we expected, and we report that as red because we think, a reporting culture is good. We don't want people to think that they can't report incidents if there have been incidents. So we sort of benchmark ourselves against our peers, and we think that our levels of reporting are not at the level that it should be. So again, we report that we are doing work on our incident reporting processes to try and make sure that people feel competent to report incidents when they happen into the organisation, because we're quite clear if we don't know something has happened, we can't learn from it, and the whole point of incident reporting is that we can learn the lessons and try and put things in place to prevent things happening again. And the last one there is also red, but that is a subset of the one above it, and because the one above it is low, then it has an impact on the bottom one as well. Because actually our numbers of patient incidents that have resulted in severe harm or death has actually reduced in absolute numbers. We have less than we had last year, but because the denominator has reduced, it makes the rate look larger. So in terms of our 15-16 priorities, these are the ones that we agreed through that process I've talked about right at the beginning. We've got 4 for 15-16. The first one is to continue with our recovery, embedding our recovery approach. This is really probably a 5, 6, 7 year strategy that we've got in the organisation. And last year, the current year, 14-15, was the first year. And talking to our stakeholders, we agreed that actually we needed to continue to have a real focus on this, and it being in the quality account, ensure that focus. So we've included that there, and those are the things that we are trying to do or intending to do in the year coming. So we want to roll out some more training to make sure that our staff feel confident in using the recovery approach. We want to increase the number of experts by experience that we have and use those to help us develop our services. And to develop some 6 peer mentor roles. So these will be people probably with lived experience, people who have had mental health problems, may still have them, who will work with service users to help them with their mental health problems. And actually, they provide, in some ways, a role model that shows that actually you can live successfully even if you do have mental health problems, mental health issues. And we have got a recovery college which was developed in Durham. It was something that we got some additional resources for from the Durham CCGs. And we established it in Durham as a pilot to see if it was effective. It's had some really, really good feedback, and we are looking to have conversations about how we can expand the level of recovery college courses that we have into other areas. And we have just been successful in winning a bid for some national monies to actually set up a virtual recovery college through the internet, etc., which should mean that more people can access it across our whole geography, even where we don't have a physical presence like we do in Durham. Our second priority is around nicotine management and smoking cessation. We know that people with mental health problems, on average, die 15 to 20 years earlier than people who do not have mental health problems. And the main cause of that is not because they commit suicide. The main cause of that is because they have poorer physical health. And they have poorer physical health for a whole host of reasons. Part of that linked to their mental health problems, part of that because of some of the medication, but a significant number of people with mental health problems smoke. So a greater proportion of the people with mental health problems smoke compared to the population that don't have mental health problems. So we feel that it is really important as an organisation that is there to serve people with mental health problems, that we do the best we can in helping to improve their physical health, and therefore hopefully helping them to live longer and reduce reduce that level of inequity between when people die prematurely. So this is why we've identified this as a real priority in the organisation. And we're going to tackle it on two fronts. We're going to tackle it on the front of working to try and encourage our service users to give up smoking, and by offering them other forms of nicotine replacement therapy, etc. But we're also going to tackle it on the front of staff as well to try and improve the staff's physical health as well through giving up smoking. So we're going to do it on on those two areas. So we've got a number of plans that are on there. It actually goes over 2 pages, this, because there's lots to do. There are some places nationally across the country who have already done this. Some of the high secure places have introduced things like this, and we will be trying to learn from them as well. Our third priority links to people with learning disabilities. One of the strong messages we got from our stakeholders when we held the stakeholder events was that traditionally our quality account priorities has focused very heavily on adults and adults with mental health problems, and we've been doing the quality account now for 4 or 5 years, and they said, why don't you have a priority about something else other than adults? You are an organisation that serves different ages, and you serve people with learning disabilities. So we took that comment on board, and we identified a priority specifically for people with learning disabilities, and that's about implementing what is called positive behavioural support, and this is particularly for people with learning disabilities who have challenging behaviours. And what it tries to do is it tries to focus on positive behaviour. So rather than waiting for an individual's behaviour to deteriorate and become more challenging, by focusing on their behaviour when it is positive and by encouraging that, we can then hopefully reduce the amount of challenging behaviour that these individuals escalate to on occasions. And it's a methodology that has been highlighted as something that can help. Some of you might be aware of through the press of the use of what's called control and restraint, or restrictive practices, where sometimes people who are very challenging in our services, in our inpatient services in particular, for their safety, we may have to restrain them. And this approach has been seen to help reduce the amount of challenging behaviour, and therefore has reduced the amount of interventions in terms of control and restraint that we are having to use. So again, something really positive from a service user's perspective. And then the other challenge from our stakeholders, just in terms of always concentrating on adults, was about actually, why don't you have a priority about children? Why don't you have something about improving the quality of care that you give to children? So we asked our children's services, our experts in the organisation, and they identified that this would be a real help. Because what we currently have at the minute is, we have a single approach to assessing the risk around the children with mental health problems may be experiencing. And obviously, children's needs vary very, very widely, from a child that might be 6 or 7 right up to a 15, 16, 17-year-old. Yet we were applying a sort of one-size-fits-all approach. So what we want to do next year is actually develop a range of different assessment methodologies that we can use depending on the child's age or developmental stage, to make sure that that risk assessment is most appropriate, and therefore we can develop the best plan of care with the child and the carer as possible. So rather than having a one-size-fits-all, we're going to try and have a range of tools
thank you very much for a very comprehensive presentation. I will now go to any questions from the public. Yes, the lady.
Yeah, I've actually got two, but I'm going to start with the positive behaviour support model because that really concerns me that. Do excuse my challenging behaviour, I'm quite possibly high functioning autistic. Challenging behaviour is a really old-fashioned term to describe people with learning disabilities. It's very offensive in fact. I'd like to know, is your positive behaviour model, positive behaviour support model, PBS model actually built accredited?
I believe so, but I would have to check.
I doubt very much it is because you were referring to control and restraint. Now I can cite at least one incident that's actually related to offender care when a young gentleman was restrained using control and restraint, straight face down. So this brings me on to my second point. Do TSS Weir Valley ever restrain children face down?
Yes, I believe that we do. Sometimes that is because when we, as part of the care plan, some children ask to be restrained in that way because of some of their history.
That's a dangerous behaviour, I'm sorry. There's more power. That is dangerous and that is appalling to hear that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Dunn.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what your plans are with mental health in this in the article area.
I mean, we work closely with our commissioners to identify service developments that we think will improve our services, and we have done a number of improvements over recent years. We also have internally within our trust our quality improvement system, where we try to look at individual areas, very specific small areas, and actually really investigate the processes that we do and how we can improve those. So we often involve service users and their carers in those events as well. So sometimes they are only small changes, but they can make a big difference to individuals. So we do a range of things, and it will vary from year to year in terms of what those might be.
So do you work with organisations such as Mind then?
We do work with organisations such as Mind, people like the Alzheimer's Society for older people, investing in children for children's services. So we work with a wide range of voluntary sector and third sector here.
Okay, thank you. Yes, the gentleman. Yes.
I have an autistic grandson, and I've spent 10 years looking at this child and trying to see what we can do to help him recover. Doctors don't look at these children, and this is a serious mistake. Our children are now being diagnosed at the rate of 1 in 50. We've got a terrible problem with this. You talk about these children being restrained. They're not only restrained, they're drugged as well. And the problem our children have in the main is that they can't communicate. And their attempts to communicate are seen as challenging behaviours. And they're given a hell of a time. There are lots of children now that are on the internet trying to get back home from institutions that are doing this to them. And the courts are holding these kids in these institutions. That lady up there referred to her thoughts on challenging behaviours. This is a terrible thing for our children. I beg all the institutions that we have in this country to have our doctors examine these kids and have this information put on a database, and they won't do it. And the reason they won't do it is because vaccines are implicated in this, and they're implicated up to their necks. We really must have a sensible debate about the effect of vaccines on our children. And when you say you have a complaints procedure, why would you have a complaints procedure at all? We don't want to listen to one another bickering at one another. We want resolution.
Absolutely. absolutely. And that's what our complaint procedure tries to get to.
Well, in that case, perhaps you could do away with complaints procedures and have procedures for dealing with concerns, so that everyone's united and getting these all our problems, people lined up to solve them, not bicker about it.
Okay, thank you. The lady in the back.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, sorry.
It was announced this morning on television that local police constables were complaining to health authorities that a lot of mental health people with issues were actually being put into cells because there was no beds for them. Do we have this problem in this area at all?
I believe that was in North Yorkshire, and I believe it was related to a decision that the local CCG had made in the Scarborough as to whether they will fund what is called a street triage service, where mental health professionals go out on the beat almost with policemen and help if they identify someone in public who may be suffering from mental health distress. That isn't an issue that we've got in Hartlepool. In fact, the Trust has just won a contract to continue to provide what's called liaison and diversion services and street triaging in this area, so no, it's not an issue for this branch.
I think what he was mainly getting at when I watched it this morning was what they were saying was, because we were putting them in the cells, the reason for that behind that because there was no hospital beds available.
No, what we have in mental health is what's called the Section 136 suite. So if anybody is arrested by the police in a public place and the police think that they may have a mental health problem, then they should be taken to what's called the place of safety, or the Section 136 suite. In North Yorkshire, they were slow at developing Section 136 suites, which is what was being referred to, but there is one at the Teesside, where there's been one some time.
Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman right at the back who indicated.
Can I refer you to your suicide prevention presentation? You said we've done everything we could to prevent it. We've made good progress, but we've lapsed into the red. Yeah? How many people in this region, in your region, have committed suicide, and how many of those people, following on from this gentleman's question, have died in police custody or whilst on remand or serving a sentence at any one of the 6 prisons that are in your region?
I don't have those figures here with me tonight, but you can certainly get them. What I do know is that the number of people who are open to the Trust, so who are on the caseload of our organisation, people we know, or who have been known to us over the past 6 months, the number of people has reduced over the last year. I couldn't tell you how many of those have been on remand, but the number has reduced. It is a figure that we get every week at our executive. We look at the numbers that have occurred that week, if they have been made. Some of those, but as I said earlier, a number of suicides, greater number of people who commit suicide are never being in touch with mental health services.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'll take this as the last question.
In the part where you say managing pressures on inpatient beds, you say that you make sure that the people taken to a local for Hartlepool place. Can you clarify what the local for Hartlepool means?
Yeah, that means well, it depends on the individual and the condition, but in the main would be to Sandwell Park or Rosebery Park in Middlesbrough.
There's nowhere in Hartlepool.
Sandwell Park is in Hartlepool.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move to members' questions. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got 3 very short questions. The first one is, when we've had various presentations from the Hospital Trust and other agencies, they talked about admissions and incidents and that type of thing, so I presume because people sort of, mental health's more complex than people coming in, getting a bandage on and walking out the other end. And so I just thought about your caseload then, if that makes sense. On average, how big is your caseload at any one time?
We have around about 45 to 50,000 open cases.
Okay. And approximately, do you know how many of them are from Hartlepool?
I don't know off the top of my head, I'm sorry.
And specifically, that's going to be a piece of information you go away with. How many of them require inpatient services from Hartlepool over the course of a 12-month period?
I could find out the number of admissions we've had.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Jonathan, before he left, was slightly concerned about a particular phraseology in the Mental Health Act of 1983. I can see the doctor getting ready to answer a challenging question on this one. And it specifically talks about those that are under 18 being cared for in an over 18 establishment, over 18 ward, sorry. And it talks about it only happening in a crisis situation and only happening for very short periods of time, and where the patient is nearly 18. Can you confirm that the 15 days that were referred to in the 16 days that were referred to in the report all fit that criteria? So they were all crisis situations, patients were nearly 18, and for short periods of time.
No, I don't believe so, because the guidance we've had on under 18s says that it is only a breach of the requirements if the between 16 and 18. Anyone admitted under 16 is a breach, and we've never had any of those. So between 16 and 18 is a breach if it is deemed clinically inappropriate. And clinically inappropriate can be more than the things that you said.
Okay, will it be possible to get a short note on that?
Yeah, as I said, we have knowledge.
And the last question, it sort of leads to the initial questions I asked about caseloads in Hartlepool. You've probably realised over the course of tonight that we're very protective about our services in Hartlepool. And there is rumours rife for lots of services turning in. Is there any truth in the rumour that Samuel Park will be closing down in the near future?
We have no plans on closing substantive review services, but there is no plan as such. So we say here.